Black Lives Matter. Please head to the link on screen to see how you can help with the ongoing protests. Any little you give helps. Thank you and enjoy the video. So, this is probably not something you would have seen from me before or heard from me before, but at this current point in time, I am working on one of the matches for BPW, and I'm sort of bored out of my mind, so I decided, why not just talk about things while I do so? And who knows, maybe some of you guys will find what I have to say interesting. So, I suppose one of the first things that I could start with is, well, my time before I was on YouTube. Specifically, how I had an online presence before I was on YouTube. And the way how that was by writing fanfiction. Specifically, Sonic the Hedgehog fanfiction. Which is why I have how do I put this? A strange relationship with Sonic the Hedgehog. I enjoy the series, I enjoy the franchise, but whenever I look at it and my experiences in the fandom, I feel a large amount of cringe. Cringe! Well, where should I start? I mentioned on the stream before that I wrote 240 plus chapters of fanfiction.
In fanfiction.
When I was a young child, I wrote 240 plus chapters of Sonic the Hedgehog fanfiction.
Oh no, not you two! Fuck, not you!
Neither one of those is a finished story, the other one is not, and more than likely is never going to be. I suppose I should start with the one that is actually finished. Actually, a small digression. This one that was finished is actually a reboot of another one that wasn't finished before. This story starred my OC, Sonic the Hedgehog character, as the main character. And if you haven't heard me speak about this before, then you're going to learn. Because this character was named Zojen the Hedgehog. I feel embarrassed talking about it as right now, but yes, the reason why I have my online username Zojen originally started off with this character. I created him when I was 13, 14, something around those lines. And I remember that I just copied basically what everyone else was doing, but I thought, hey, you know what would be cool? What if we made this character edgy? So, what I did was, at the time, I believe, what's the name called? I forget the name of the game at the moment, but it starred someone called Alex Mercer. It started with a P, Predator, Prometheus, something along those lines. But the main power of this character was that he was able to absorb biomass and use it as weapons, and it looked pretty badass. So I was thinking, yo, what if my character could do that, but he did it by eating brains? So this monstrous character who can eat the brains of people and steal their powers and abilities was supposed to be the hero of this story. And at the time I thought, you know what I haven't seen anybody do that I can do and be cool? I'll make this a choose your own adventure story, like the Goosebumps novels. The issue with that is that you're essentially writing multiple stories instead of just one. And unfortunately, this childish version of me did not recognize this problem until he was several chapters into the story. And if you look at this story, And if you don't start from the beginning, it will make absolutely no sense. And I remember that I had to actually, that in order to make some of the routes make sense, I had to, how do I put this? Put things out of order. Essentially, it was a terrible story, and I ended up stopping it and starting something new because I realized that I had taken out much more than I could chew. But digression over, back to the story that was finished. It was called Zojen Reloaded. Ugh, Christ, I feel awful, just awful thinking about it now. I suppose this is what it's like for people being embarrassed at their more embarrassing actions as younger children. But yes, Zojen Reloaded. I decided, hey, how about instead of making a character who was awful and bloody and edgy and all that, how about we make him a little bit more likable? And so he still used some powers from the game that starts with a P. I think it's good. For the time being, I'll just call it Predator because I am not remembering. Actually, hold on. Let me just look it up real quick.
One Google search later.
Prototype, that's what it was called. Okay, so instead of doing the whole stealing people's biomass by eating them, I instead stole his the other abilities by just having him be able to use his bones to make swords out of his arms, or cover himself in armor, or make tentacles, things like that. And you'd think that's a very simple power to go on, and it is. But unfortunately, my young ass decided it'd be a great idea to... Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just scroll back before that. So the way how this character is that in Sonic the Hedgehog, there is a special army forces called GUN. Gun. Very subtle. But I do not remember for the life of me what it stands for. But I thought, hey, everyone's having their characters be like 20 or 19 or 16, so how about I do something cool and have my character be a sergeant in the GUN and be 28? And so, it's cool. I have this older character. He's the only one I've seen online that has facial hair, so here I thought that he was being unique. But if you look at his design, you can clearly see he's just Shadow the Hedgehog, but with yellow instead of red. I am digressing again. So, the story starts off. My character is leading a bunch of people in the GUN, and he gets attacked by some monster, and it basically kills him. But instead of killing him, he finds himself waking up and he has these special powers. And the first task he's given is to pretend to be a superhero in a poor borough of New York. And while he fights this Italian-looking dude who beats the hell out of him until the girlfriend XP of his called Hazel, who belonged to a friend of mine at the time, sang for him and gave him the strength needed to fight this guy off. And then, if I remember correctly, he fought this guy's boss, who had a Chaos Emerald. And here is where the special part, quote-unquote, of this story comes about. You have the ability to choose to act like an anti-hero or an actual hero. Where if you're an anti-hero, you kill the guy. If you're a hero, you just give him to the police. And do you know what this did in the grand scheme of the story? Absolutely nothing. I just thought it'd be cool. And I guess in a way it is, but even so, it's still a bit of an annoying. I do remember that people did enjoy the story, and I definitely did enjoy writing it, but I don't think I could ever go back to reading it, because I've definitely increased in terms of skill as a writer. You probably would not be able to tell it by how I talk and use strange phrases like definitely increased in terms of skill as a writer, instead of I just become a better writer, but, almost a decade worth of experience is sure to do something. But as the story goes on, there was a side plot where two soldiers in his two soldiers in my characters, in Zojen's platoon, survived being attacked, and they were working with Shadow and Rouge and Omega, I think, to track down bad guys. And the bad guys turned out to be Zojen because he was set up, and Zojen fought Shadow, Omega, and Rouge and fought them to a draw. Now, I thought this was humble because back then, if you have your characters fight official characters, they'd always win because that's how it's supposed to be. So here's my ass thinking, oh, I am humble having my character fight 3 incredibly powerful people to a draw. I am clearly a better writer than everyone else on DeviantArt, but in reality, I'm just as bad, if not worse. Not to say that everyone in the Sonic fandom is that bad, but I'll switch to that a bit later. But if I remember correctly, after this, it was discovered that there was a monster inside a nuclear power plant in China, which is where they all fought to begin with. And I do not remember why I thought it'd be a smart idea to have a monster in a nuclear power plant in China. Why would people not, realize that there's a monster in the power plant? Why would there not be people shutting down the power plant and trying to kill off the monster? Well, I suppose that's why Team Dark was there to begin with. But, still, not all that making sense in terms of story. But after this, I remember that I created the monster to be called an Antimobian, sort of a creature designed by an evil scientist to destroy all Mobians. It was multiple months after I started the story that I realized that Antimobians are a real thing. So I'm just sitting here like, oh my god, I'm a fraud. How could I not know about Antimobians because they're a comic book thing, and I never read the Sonic comic books. But I decided to rewrite everything and put them in the story. Of course, it did not mesh correctly, and I didn't go back to edit the story because I didn't even edit anything. I just posted the first drafts. And anyway, it ends with Zojen going to Antimobius, trying to fight his way over to the king of Antimobius. He beats the king, turns out to be some sort of angel XP, and it's terrible. If you wish, I could go into more detail about the story, or if you look down in the description, you'll find a link to it yourself, though why you would want to read it is beyond me. But this is the one that I finished. It ended with Zojen supposedly dying while fighting on a different planet. Eventually he comes back. Of course he would. You really think my character would die on a planet? I'm not that smart when it comes to writing as a kid. Well, I wasn't that smart when it came to writing as a kid. But that was that story. At the same time when I was writing it, I also wrote another story called Silver X, obviously based on the idea of Sonic X, because I thought it wasn't fair that Silver was never in the Sonic X series, even though now I realize that he didn't exist early enough to even be in that series. But it was mainly meant to be Silver's adventures with the group, with Silver as the protagonist. And it was an interesting story, I will admit. It did run its course. It should have ended a long time ago. And I realized that now, which is part of the reason why I never went on to finish it. Again, it will be in the description, but if you look through it, you will see that it goes on for about 60 chapters, and then it stops at a cliffhanger. Ironically, well, not ironically, but interestingly, this cliffhanger was around the time when I introduced the Slender Man, yes, that Slender Man, as a character in the story. And I don't know why I thought it'd be a great idea to add Slender Man as a character into the story, but I did, and it was not a good idea. Be that as it may, that's done now, and it's probably never going to be finished. So, if you decide to read it, just realize that if for some strange reason you actually enjoy the series, it's not going to be finished anytime soon. But that was what I did as what I gave to that fandom, I suppose. It wasn't my proudest work, probably never will be, but it's something I do look fondly upon, because it's part of, and while I've been tempted to delete all these stories that I wrote because they suck, it's part of my history. Without writing those stories, I don't think I would be as good a writer as I am today. Not only that, but I probably wouldn't even have my online name if it weren't for Zojen the Hedgehog. So I suppose I can give that bad idea a thankful wave. But aside from that, I also went into role-playing. In DeviantArt, I'm not sure if this works at the moment, but when I was on the site, there used to be a system where you can chat with others in like big chat rooms, and I joined the Sonic ones because why wouldn't I? It was an interesting experience. The first one I joined, I do not remember the name of it, but I can tell you for a fact that it had a lot of drama that I found myself just jumping head on into because I didn't know any better at the time. So, for the sake of not giving away any names that might still be used today, I am going to give certain people a designation. The owner of this chat room, I will call Crystal. The bad apple that I'm going to talk about, I will call I was about to call him Shadow, but that's already taken, so I'll call him Ball. And yeah, if I have anyone else, I will give them a name as I remember this story. But this original chat room, it was unorganized, to say the least. It was the most popular Sonic chat room and the most well used. You will go into it, and I'd say the least amount of people I've ever seen in it is 25. The most I've seen in it is 60. It's almost always busy, with a lot of people RPing different things. And it's a little bit difficult because people would never specify what they're RPing, like whether they're RPing or whether they're talking. So you can hop in and you'll see 5 conversations between people just chatting about things, and a fight between 2 characters. And it was weird. It was weird, but I loved it because at the time I was an antisocial kid, and that was how I got my social activities for the day. Now, Crystal, for some reason, if I remember correctly, was like a friend of a friend. Sorry, let me rephrase. One of Crystal's mods, who I will call Moon, became a friend of mine somehow. And because we talked a lot, I got a little bit closer to Crystal. And while I was talking to Crystal, I began to realize that there were certain ways that she was treating the chat room that was obviously not okay. For example, the bad apple Ball. I don't know their exact relationship, but what I do know is that she would be very lenient towards him half of the time, and many people complained about it because that ain't okay. But the mod Moon tried to do something against Ball. Ball had a conversation with Crystal, and then Moon was no longer the mod. And after something like that, I believe that was a camel feather back situation. I was in that chat room for multiple months, and in the process I saw it break down like it did with one thing I named being just one of the problems that the chat had. And after that, a friend of mine, who was also in this chat, who I will name Noon, she decided it'd be a better idea. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was Noon. Noon decided it'd be a better idea to start her own chat group, and so she did. And this one being a lot more structured and whatnot, but some of the people in the old chat room didn't like the people in this chat room, and it was vice versa too. I made a mod of this chat room, and I dealt with I made the poor decision of trying to play peacekeeper and trying to be the hero in this, because as a kid who looked up to people like Sonic, of course I would think it'd be a great idea to poke my nose where it didn't belong and try and solve problems that had nothing to do with me. But that is what I did. I spent much time trying to solve those issues, and I feel that all I ended up doing was making things worse in most situations. So eventually, the other person I was talking about, well, I'd never mentioned her, but someone else who I will call Tuesday invited me to her own private chat. I just stayed there for a while until that blew its course. But at that point, I was out of the Sonic fandom. I had stopped writing fan fiction. I had stopped role-playing Sonic. I was just out of it. And after that, I was gone from that fandom for I'd say 5 years. I didn't return to it until I was like 18. At that point, I met one of the friends that I'd also been with in both of those chat rooms. She had her own smaller chat room, but it was cozy, it was fine, and I decided to join in, and because we're old friends, we got along fine. But there was this one mod who roleplayed Miles per Hour, Tails, and he was interesting, to say the least. He played Miles as an evil genius, which is cool, nothing against that, but the problem was he tried to be an evil genius as well. He talked like he was a supervillain, and I ignored him, most of us did, until he did something where he broke a rule. I forget what the rule was exactly, but the mods decided it'd be better to ban him, or kick him, or they didn't kick him, they removed his mod privileges. So, in response to this guy, he hacked into the website, changed the chat's password, and made himself the owner of it. It was certainly a wake-up call, because nobody expected him to do that. Nobody expected this person playing a supervillain to actually do some supervillain shit. So, of course, he tried to get everyone to join back, but with him in control. Everyone basically told him to fuck off, and instead we moved back to DeviantArt. So, in response, this guy, Miles per Hour, he decided to make it his personal mission to fuck with us for months. He tried to hack into the website, he would spam the chat, he sent all of us messages, he sent me death threats, and it was an interesting experience, but it was weighing down on all of us, even though we tried to admit that it didn't. And the unfortunate thing was that with all the stress, I was an absolute jackass. I did and said some terrible things, and nobody called me out for it when they honestly should have. For example, this friend of mine, who part of the reason why I'm not mentioning her name is because she likes to remain private, and she didn't know how to deal with this. I was awful because I wanted her to be more direct, when obviously she had her reasons for not doing so. It ended with me calling her a coward, and she never called me out on it. Years later, like a couple years ago, I did send her a message apologizing for my actions, and she forgave me, which is shocking. but that just is a testament to the kind of person that she is. But I digress. I did leave that chat, partly because of how we were reacting to that, but I guess I'd be lying if I didn't say that, being taunted by a crazy hacker man was not enough to push me out of that fandom altogether. But yeah, that was my experience in the Sonic fandom as a deviant artist. If you would like to listen to more of these ramblings or have any other questions about this, let me know in the chat and I might answer it if I ever do one of these rambling things again. And if for any crazy reason you want to read those Sonic fanfictions I was mentioning before, you will find them in the description. Not sure why you would want to read through those pieces of filth, but, to each his own. Thank you for listening, and I'm probably gonna get back to working on this video now. So, I'll see you later.